Eat slowly, you are not being chased. That was the whole lesson. 5 words a mother in eastern Tennessee said to her daughter across a kitchen table on a winter evening more than 60 years ago. The girl was 11, maybe 12. She had been bolting her supper the way children do when they have somewhere better to be, and her mother set down her own fork and waited until the room was quiet and said it plain. Eat slowly. You are not being chased. The girl did not understand it then. She understood it 40 years later, standing at her own stove, when she caught herself eating dinner over the sink with the television going in the next room, alone, hurrying through a meal that no one was waiting on. She remembered the kitchen. She remembered the fork going down, and she understood at last that her mother had not been teaching her about food. Her mother had been teaching her how to be a person who could sit still inside her own life. There was a time, in this country, when a girl learned 100 small things before she was old enough to drive. Not from a book, not from a screen. From a woman who loved her, standing close, saying, "Do it this way. Watch me. Now you try." And most of those lessons are gone now, not lost in a fire or a flood, lost in plain sight, one unmade gesture at a time. What follows are 25 of them. This channel exists for one reason: to remember how American families lived, how they raised their children, how they kept their homes and held one another together before so much of it slipped away without anyone deciding to let it go. If you believe these old, ordinary things were worth keeping, take a moment to subscribe. It costs you nothing. It tells this channel that someone out there still cares whether these stories get told before the last person who remembers them is gone. We begin at number 25. Number 25. How to set a table for people you love. It seems like nothing now. A fork goes here, a knife goes there, the napkin folded just so. But a girl in rural Missouri was not being taught geometry. She was being taught that the people coming to that table mattered enough to prepare for. The plates came down in a certain order. The good glasses, the ones that came from her grandmother, were rinsed and held up to the window light to check for spots. The salt and the pepper were set within reach of the oldest person at the table because his hands shook and no one wanted him to have to ask. That was the lesson underneath the lesson. You set a table so that the people at it never have to ask for anything. You think ahead on their behalf before they know they need it. A child who learned to do that grew into a woman who could walk into any room and quietly make it more comfortable for everyone in it. That is not a small skill. That is the whole foundation of hospitality. And it began with a fork laid down straight. Today, the table is wherever the plate happens to land. We did not lose the table. We lost the reason to set it. Number 24. How to write a thank you note by hand. A widow in the Carolinas kept a small box of stationery in the drawer of a side table her whole life. Within 2 or 3 days of any kindness done to her, a casserole brought over a ride to the doctor. A card on her birthday, she sat down and wrote a few lines in her own hand and walked them to the mailbox herself. Her daughters learned to do the same before they were 12, sitting at the same table asking, "How do you spell grateful?" watching their mother think for a moment before she wrote. The note was never about the words. Anyone can find words. The note was the proof that the kindness had been received and weighed and remembered. It said, "You were not invisible to me. What you did landed somewhere." In a world before instant everything, a handwritten line that arrived 4 days later carried something a quick message never could. It carried the time it took. It carried the fact that someone sat down for you. A girl who learned to write that note learned that gratitude is an action, not a feeling. Feelings fade by The note got mailed. That was the difference. Number 23. How to mend instead of throw away. In a coal miner's house in West Virginia, there was a sewing basket, and the sewing basket was not decoration. A button came loose, and it was sewn back on that same night by lamplight before it could be lost. A hem fell, and a girl was handed the needle and shown how to take it up so the stitches did not show on the right side. A sock wore thin at the heel, and it was darned woven back together with a wooden egg slipped inside to hold the shape. Think of what that taught a child, year after year. That things are worth saving, that a small flaw is not the end of something useful, that your own 2 hands can put right what has come undone. A girl raised on a sewing basket grew up believing that very little in this life is truly beyond repair, and she carried that belief into things much larger than socks. into friendships, into a marriage, into her own discouragement on a hard week. The grocery aisles and the discount racks sell us the opposite lesson now. When it tears, replace it. When it fades, throw it out. We have gotten very good at throwing things out. Number 22. How to make a meal out of almost nothing. A grandmother in the Ozarks could open a near-empty pantry, a half bag of cornmeal, a knob of butter, an onion going soft, the last of the beans soaking from the night before, and put a supper on the table that filled 4 stomachs and tasted like care. She was not following a recipe. She was reading what she had and deciding what it could become. She taught her granddaughter by handing her the wooden spoon and saying, "Taste it. What does it need? More salt, a little more time." This was the most quietly powerful skill a mother ever passed down, because it was the skill of never being afraid. A woman who could feed her family from the back of the pantry and the bottom of the icebox was a woman who slept at night. Hard times came, and in those hollows they always came, and she did not panic, because she knew that dried beans cost almost nothing and stretched for days, and that a person does not need much to be fed well, only the knowing of how. We have full cupboards now, and many of us cannot cook a thing in them. We have given a generation everything in the icebox and taken away the one skill that made the icebox unnecessary. That is a strange kind of poverty, to be surrounded by food and unable to make a meal. Number 21. How to stretch $1 until it cried. The household money in a steelworker's home outside Pittsburgh came in on Friday and had to last until the next Friday, and a mother sat her daughter down at the kitchen table and showed her the arithmetic of survival. So much for the rent, so much set aside in an envelope for the winter coat that would be needed in 3 months. So much, and not a penny more, for the groceries. The cheapest cut of meat simmered long and slow until it gave up and went tender. Die-old bread at half price. Nothing wasted, because waste was the one luxury they could not afford. A girl who learned this did not learn to be cheap. She learned to be free. She learned that a person who controls $1 is never quite controlled by the lack of one. She learned to look at $11 a week not as a humiliation but as a problem with a solution, and she solved it every week, and the solving made her strong. There is a reason no one wants to teach this anymore. There is no money to be made teaching people to spend less. The whole machine is built the other way. These were not chores. Set that word aside for a moment. We call them chores now because we have decided that the work of a home is beneath us, a list of tasks to be outsourced or rushed through or felt guilty about. But every one of these lessons was a way of saying to a child, you can take care of yourself and you can take care of others, and there will come a day when someone needs you to know how. A mother who taught her daughter to mend a hem and stretch $1 was not preparing her for a small life. She was arming her against a hard one. She was making sure that whatever the world took, it could not take her daughter's competence, because competence lives in the hands and the hands remember. That is what is breaking now, not the chores, the quiet confidence underneath them. Number 20. How to receive a guest. When someone came to the door of a farmhouse in Nebraska, there was a way it was done, and a girl absorbed it by watching her mother do it 1,000 times. The coat was taken and hung. The good chair was offered. Coffee was put on before the guest could say they did not want to be any trouble, because being trouble was the point. A guest was meant to be trouble, gladly. There was something set out to eat, even if it was only crackers and the last of the jam, because no one left that house hungry. The lesson was that your home is not a fortress. It is a place that opens. A girl who learned to receive a guest with grace learned that the door of a life is meant to swing wide, that a table is bigger than it looks, that there is almost always room for one more if you are willing to stretch the supper. She learned generosity as a habit of the hands before she ever heard it named as a virtue. The doors are mostly shut now. We schedule one another weeks in advance. The coffee does not go on for the unexpected knock because the unexpected knock has stopped coming. Number 19. How to iron a shirt so a man could hold his head up. A mother in rural Alabama ironed her husband's one good shirt every Saturday night so he could wear it to church and to anything that mattered. And she taught her daughter the order of it. The collar first, then the cuffs, then the yoke across the shoulders, then the body, the iron hissing against the damp cloth. It took patience. A scorched shirt was a small tragedy in a house with 2 shirts. What the girl learned was that the way a person is turned out into the world is a form of care. A pressed shirt said, "This man is looked after. This family holds together. We may not have much, but we are not careless with ourselves." Dignity in a house with a fixed income was something you made with your own hands and an iron on a Saturday night for the people you loved. We have wrinkle-free everything now, and somehow we look more rumpled than ever on the inside where it shows. Number 18. How to keep your word and be where you said you would be. This one had no tools and no recipe. A grandmother in Wisconsin simply lived it in front of her granddaughter every single day until the girl could not imagine doing otherwise. If she said she would be there at 2, she was there at 2. If she made a promise, the promise was kept, even when keeping it was inconvenient. Even when no one would have known the difference, especially then. A girl raised inside that kind of reliability grew up understanding that a person is only as good as the weight of their word, and that being on time is not about clocks. It is about respect. It is a way of saying, your time matters as much as mine. To make someone wait with no reason was to tell them quietly that they did not count, and so they did not make people wait. We are all late now. All of us, all the time, and we have 1,000 reasons, and every one of them is true, and none of them is the point. Number 17. How to carry yourself into a room. A mother in New Orleans would put a book on her daughter's head and have her walk the length of the hall, not to be silly, but to teach her spine to remember. Shoulders back, chin level. Walk like you have somewhere to be, and you are not ashamed to be the one going there. It was not vanity. A girl with nothing in her pockets could still walk into a room as though she belonged in it, and most of the time the room agreed. The lesson was that posture is a language, and that you are speaking it whether you mean to or not. A woman who carried herself with quiet steadiness was treated with quiet steadiness in return. She did not have to be loud. She did not have to demand. She simply occupied her own height, and people made room. That cost nothing. The poorest girl in the county could afford it. We have forgotten that the body says what the mouth has not yet decided to. We slump through our days and wonder why the world reads us as small. If any of this is stirring something in you, if you are remembering a woman who taught you one of these things, or a woman you wish had, take a moment and write it in the comments. Tell where you are from, and tell what she taught you, even if it was only one small thing, even if you did not understand it until years later. This channel reads them, every one. There is something quiet and good about discovering how many homes held the same lessons, in towns that never knew each other's names. Stories that are not told are lost. This is one place they can still be kept. Number 16. How to listen and let another person finish. At the family table in a Tennessee holler, children spoke when there was a pause and not before. And a girl learned the discipline of listening the way you learned anything, by being made to do it until it became who she was. She learned to look at the person speaking, to wait, to hear the whole of a thing before she decided what she thought of it. Her mother taught her that the loudest person in a room is rarely the wisest, and that the one who listens learns twice as much as the one who talks. This was not about silencing a girl, it was the opposite. It was teaching her that her words would carry more weight if she spent them carefully. That a thing said into a real silence lands harder than a thing shouted over others. A woman who knew how to listen could sit with anyone, the grieving, the angry, the frightened, and be a comfort, because she had learned to make room in herself for another person's voice. Now, we all talk at once into devices over one another, and the listening has gone out of the world like heat out of an open door. Number 15. How to keep an orderly home with very little. A widow on a fixed income in Missouri kept a house you could have eaten off the floor of, and she did it with rags and vinegar and a kind of daily rhythm she passed to her daughter without ever calling it a system. The beds were made before breakfast every morning because an unmade bed pulled the whole day down with it. The dishes were done before bed every night because no one should wake up to yesterday's mess, a little each day so that it never piled into a mountain. The lesson was that order is not about wealth. The poorest house could be clean, and clean was a kind of self-respect that no amount of money could buy and no lack of money could take away. A girl who learned to keep a home in order learned to keep a life in order because the same habit ran through both, the small daily tending that keeps chaos at the door. We outsource it now, or we let it slide. Or we feel a low hum of shame about the state of our rooms and never quite trace it back to the rhythm we were never taught. Number 14. How to put food by for the lean months. In a farmhouse kitchen in the years after the war, late summer was a season of jars. Tomatoes, green beans, peaches, whatever the garden gave up in its abundance, all of it cooked and packed and sealed against the winter that was always coming. A girl stood at her mother's elbow in the August heat, the kitchen close and steaming, and learned to fill a jar and seal it true so it would keep. What she was really learning was how to think past today. The summer was generous, but the summer did not last, and a woman who only ate when food was plentiful would starve when it was not. So she captured the abundance and held it for the lean time. She learned in her hands the oldest wisdom there is, that you prepare in the season of plenty for the season of want, because the season of want always comes and it does not send word ahead. The shelves are full year-round now, and we have forgotten that abundance was ever a thing you had to catch and keep. We have forgotten how to think past today, and the lean months still come. They always come. Number 13. How to nurse the sick and sit up through a fever. When a child ran a fever in a house in the hills of Kentucky, the mother knew what to do, and the older daughter learned by being handed the cool cloth and shown how to lay it on the small hot forehead, how to coax broth into someone who would not eat, how to sit through the long bad hours of the night when the fever climbed. There was no clinic close, and so the knowing lived in the women of the house, passed down from sickbed to sickbed. The lesson went far past medicine. A girl learned that when someone you love is suffering, you do not leave, you stay. You make yourself useful in small ways, even when you cannot fix the big thing. You wring out the cloth again. You sit in the dark and you keep watch, because the keeping watch is itself a medicine. A woman who learned to nurse the sick learned the deepest thing a person can know. That presence is what we have to give one another when there is nothing else. We hand it all to professionals now, and there is mercy in that, real mercy. But something also left the house when the keeping watch left it. The young no longer learn it. They reach an age and a hard hour, and they do not know how to stay. Stop here for a moment, because there is a thread running through every one of these, and it is worth naming before we go on. None of these lessons were really about the task. The table was not about forks. The jars were not about peaches. The cool cloth was not about fever. Every one of them was a mother teaching a daughter the same single thing in 100 different shapes. That a person is made to take care of others and to be taken care of in turn, and that the skills of the hands are only the visible part of a much larger work. We were strong, once, because we had little and we needed each other. And the needing was not shameful. It was the whole point, the very thing that bound a family and a town together. What is wearing us thin now is not that we have less, it is that we have arranged our lives so cleverly that we need no one, and no one needs us, and we mistake that loneliness for freedom. Number 12. How to write a letter that kept a family close across distance. When sons went off to work or to war and daughters married and moved 3 states away, it was the mother who held the family together with a pen. A woman in the Carolinas wrote letters every week of her life to her children, to her sisters, to the cousin who had moved to California and would otherwise have drifted out of reach entirely. She taught her daughters to do it too, to fill a page with the small, ordinary news that is the real substance of belonging. The garden, the weather, who was poorly, who had a new baby. The lesson was that closeness is not given. It is maintained, week by week, with effort, by someone willing to do the maintaining. A family does not stay close on its own. It drifts apart on its own. Staying close takes a pen and a stamp and a half hour every Sunday, and a woman who understood that became the heart that kept the far-flung body alive. We have a dozen ways to reach each other instantly now, and somehow we have never been further apart. The instant message does not do what the letter did. The letter said, "I sat down and thought about you for a while." We do not sit down anymore. Number 11. How to make do and mend your way through hard times. There was a phrase older women used, a whole philosophy folded into 4 words: make do and mend. A mother in Depression-era memory taught it to her daughter, not as words, but as a way of living. Turn a collar when it frays so the shirt lasts another year. Save the buttons off anything worn past saving. Let out a dress as a girl grew rather than buy a new one. Cut down a grown man's old coat into a child's. Nothing arrived that was not used until it could be used no more, and then used once again for something else. The girl who grew up inside make do and mend learned that resourcefulness is a kind of dignity, that there is no shame in a patched elbow worn with a straight back. She learned that a person who can make do is a person who cannot easily be broken, because she does not depend on having things go her way. She bends what she has to fit what she needs, and she keeps going. We are taught the reverse now from the time we can watch a screen. Want it? Buy it. Tire of it. discard it, want the next thing. It is a way of living that has made a great many people rich and a great many people strangely empty, and no one quite knows why. Number 10. How to bake bread with her own two hands. There is a girl, now an old woman in Wisconsin, who can still feel it in her palms, the way her mother taught her to know when the dough was ready. Not by a clock, but by the feel of it, the way it stopped being sticky and turned smooth and alive under her hands, the kitchen warm, the smell of it rising, the patience of waiting for something that could not be hurried, that would collapse if you rushed it. The bread was food, yes. But the baking was a lesson in something a girl could get nowhere else, that some good things cannot be sped up, that you must do your part and then wait, that the waiting is not idleness but a kind of trust. A woman who had baked bread 1,000 times knew in her bones that the world runs on rhythms older than her impatience, and she made a small piece with that every week with flour on her hands. We buy it sliced in a bag now, and it keeps for a strange long time, and it does not smell of anything, and the kitchen stays cold, and the daughters never learn the feel of the dough turning alive. Number 9. How to keep a confidence and hold her tongue. A mother in a small Missouri town taught her daughter, mostly by example, that some things told to you are not yours to repeat. A neighbor's trouble, a friend's shame, the hard private business of a family down the road. The girl watched her mother be told things terrible and tender things, and watched those things go no further. And she came to understand that her mother was trusted precisely because she could be trusted. That people brought her their burdens because they knew she would not set them down where others could pick them up. This was a quiet kind of power and a quiet kind of love, to be a person to whom things could be safely told. A girl who learned to hold a confidence became, in time, a woman others ran to in their worst hours, because she was a closed door and not an open window. Discretion was her gift to the people around her, and she gave it without their ever fully knowing. Now the private has become the public, and everything is told to everyone, and we wonder why so few feel safe enough to tell the truth to anyone at all. Number 8. How to comfort someone and sit with their grief. When death came to a community, and it came often, in those years, a mother in West Virginia knew exactly what to do, and her daughter learned by going with her. You did not stay away because you did not know what to say. You went, you brought food, so the grieving did not have to think about feeding themselves. You sat, you did not fill the silence with foolish words about a better place or how it was for the best. You let the silence be. You held a hand. You washed the dishes that had piled up. You were simply there, a body in the house, so the bereaved were not alone with it. The lesson was the hardest one of all and the most needed, that you cannot fix grief, and you are not meant to, and the worst mistake is to stay away because your helplessness embarrasses you. A woman who had learned to sit with grief was never useless at a deathbed or a graveside because she knew the secret. Presence is the gift. You just go. We have lost our nerve for it. We send a message. We mean to visit, and we do not. We stay away from the grieving because we do not know the words, never having been taught that there were never supposed to be words. Number 7. How to keep the Sunday and make a day feel different from the rest. In a Baptist family in rural Tennessee, Sunday was not like the other 6 days, and a girl absorbed the difference in her bones long before she could have explained it. There was the church in the morning, the same pew, the same faces, and then there was the Sunday supper after the service, the one big meal of the week, the table fuller than usual. The afternoon slow and unhurried, the grown folks talking on the porch while the children ran themselves out in the yard until dark. The lesson was that a life needs rhythm, that not every day should feel the same, that there must be a day set apart or all the days blur into one long gray exhaustion. The Sunday was a fence around rest. It said this far and no further. The work stops here. The family gathers. The week is laid down. A girl raised with a real Sunday grew up knowing that rest is not laziness, that you are not a machine, that the soul needs a shore to come back to. We have erased the line now. Every day is a work day, and every day is a shopping day, and no day is set apart. And we are tired in a way our grandparents would not have recognized, a tiredness that sleep does not touch. Number 6. How to say no with grace and without apology. A grandmother in the Ozarks taught her granddaughter something that took the girl decades to value, that a woman is allowed to say no, kindly and firmly, and that she does not owe a long explanation for it. No, thank you, I cannot. No, that does not suit me. said plainly with warmth, without the endless apologizing and excusing that we mistake now for politeness. The grandmother could decline a thing and stay friends with the person she declined because her no was clean and carried no resentment in it. The lesson was that a person who cannot say no has no real yes to give because every yes is given under quiet duress. A woman who could say no with grace stayed whole. She did not spread herself across every demand until there was nothing left of her. She kept enough of herself to give freely where she chose to give. That clean no was the guardian of a generous yes. We have lost it entirely. We say yes to everything and resent half of it and call the resentment burnout. And we never once considered that we were simply never taught to decline a thing without falling apart over it. We are down to the last 5, and these are the ones that go deepest. So take this moment before we finish and let this channel ask one thing of you. If even one of these lessons has reached back and touched a memory, a kitchen, a sewing basket, a woman's hands on yours, showing you how, then this is the place to leave it. Write in the comments the one thing your mother or your grandmother taught you that you have never forgotten, where you are from, her name, if you would like to say it, so that for a moment she is spoken of again. These comments have become a kind of porch where strangers sit together and remember out loud, and the porch only grows when one more voice comes up the steps. Come up the steps. Number 5. How to grow something from the ground up. A farm wife in Nebraska had a garden that fed her family half the year, and she taught her daughter the whole long patience of it, the breaking of the soil in spring, the dropping of the seed, the daily watching, the weeding, and the watering through the dry weeks. The slow miracle of a green shoot becoming a thing you could eat, it was not quick, it was the opposite of quick. It took a whole season and could be ruined by weather you did not control. The lesson lived in the waiting and the tending. A girl learned that the best things come slow and demand faithfulness, that you do your work and then you trust the ground, that you cannot pull a plant up to make it grow faster, you can only tend it and wait. She learned where food came from, truly, in her hands and her aching back, and so she never quite took it for granted again. A tomato she had grown tasted of more than a tomato. We buy it all now, picked early in some far-off place. And the children think food comes from the store, the way they think water comes from the tap. And the connection to the ground that fed every generation before us has gone quiet in a single lifetime. Number 4. How to carry herself through hard times without breaking. A coal miner's wife in West Virginia lived through things that would test anyone: lean winters, a husband hurt in the mine, the constant nearness of want, and her daughters watched her do it with a steadiness that did not come from having it easy. She did not fall apart in front of the children. She did not pretend things were fine, either. She simply met the hard thing squarely, did what could be done about it, and carried the rest without letting it carry her. When she wept, and she did weep, she wept, and then she got up and made the supper. The lesson, taught wordlessly over years, was the most valuable inheritance a mother could leave, that hardship is survivable, that you can be afraid and still function, that the test of a person is not whether the storm comes, but whether they keep their footing inside it. A girl who watched her mother stay whole through bad years grew up with a quiet certainty that she too could endure, because she had seen it done up close by someone she loved. We protect the young from every hardship now, with the best of intentions. And then we wonder why so many of them shatter at the first real weight. They never got to watch anyone carry it. They were never shown that it could be carried. Number 3. How to pass it all down to the next one. This is the lesson that holds all the others, and a grandmother in Missouri understood it in her bones. Everything she had been taught, she taught forward. She did not keep her knowing to herself. She stood her granddaughter at the stove and the sewing basket and the garden row and said, "Watch me. Now you do it," and she was patient with the clumsy first tries because she remembered her own. She knew that a skill held by only one person dies with that person, and that the whole long chain of women behind her had survived only because each one had bothered to teach the next. The lesson was that you are a link, not an end. What was given to you is not yours to keep. It is yours to pass on, intact, to a child who will pass it on again, so that the chain that reaches back 200 years reaches forward 200 more. A woman who taught her daughter to teach was not raising a daughter. She was raising every daughter who would ever come after, and that is the chain that has broken, not by malice, by distraction, by distance, by 100 small Sundays where no one stood at the stove and said, "Watch me." A grandmother in Missouri knows things her granddaughter 3 states away will never learn. And when that grandmother dies, those things die with her, and no fire took them. We simply stopped standing close enough to pass them hand to hand. Number 2, how to find her own worth without anyone handing it to her. A widow in rural Alabama who had buried a husband young and raised her children on a fixed income and the work of her own hands, taught her daughter the deepest thing of all, and she taught it without ever once saying it. She taught her that a woman's worth is not in what she owns or how she is seen, but in what she can do, who she can care for, the steadiness she brings into a room. The widow had almost nothing the world counts, and she walked through her days with a settled dignity that no poverty could touch, because her worth was rooted in her own competence and her own kindness, in soil that no hard season could wash away. The girl learned, watching her, that you do not wait for the world to tell you that you matter. You build a self that matters whether the world notices or not. You become useful and reliable and kind and capable with your hands, and then you stand on that and it holds, because you built it yourself and no one can take back what they did not give you. This is what we are starving for now, in the middle of all our plenty. A sense of worth that does not depend on being seen, on being chosen, on the thin approval of strangers. The widow had it on almost no money at all. Her great-granddaughters, with everything, go looking for it everywhere, but the one place she found it in the quiet knowledge that she could take care of her own. And, number 1, the lesson underneath all the others, how to make a house into a home. Everything else on this list was a piece of this one. The set table, the mended hem, the bread, the jars, the letters, the cool cloth on the fever, the seed in the ground, every one of them was, in the end, a way of doing the single great work that a mother spent a lifetime teaching her daughter to do, to take a set of walls and a roof and turn it, by 10,000 small acts of care, into the one place on earth where the people you love are safe and fed and known. That is not a skill you can buy. It cannot be ordered or delivered or downloaded. It is built by hand over years out of attention. A girl in any of these towns, the Tennessee holler, the Pittsburgh row house, the Nebraska farm, learned that a home is not a thing you have. It is a thing you make, daily, mostly invisibly, and mostly for others. She learned that love is not a feeling you announce, but a series of unglamorous acts performed so faithfully that the people inside the home never even have to notice them, the way you do not notice the air, the made bed, the kept word, the supper on the table at the same hour every night, the light left on. That is what is slipping away from us, and it is so much larger than any single skill on this list. We have houses now, fine ones, full of things our grandparents could not have dreamed of. And so many of them are not homes. They are places where people who barely cross paths sleep and charge their devices and leave again. The thing that turned walls into a home was the daily, deliberate, taught handed-down work of taking care of one another. We were strong in the lean years because we had little and we needed each other, and the needing pulled us close. And we are coming apart now in the fat years because we have arranged it so that we need no one and no one needs us, and we have mistaken that for the good life. It was never about the forks or the dough or the jars. It was about this, that a person was made to belong to other people and to be needed by them, and to know in her own 2 hands how to take care of the ones she loved. So here is the one small thing to do this week. Find the oldest woman you still have, a mother, a grandmother, a aunt, the woman from church who is always cooking for somebody, and ask her to teach you one thing she knows that you do not, how she makes the one dish, how she sews the button so it holds, how she stretched the money in the lean years. Stand close while she shows you, watch her hands, and write it down in your own hand before it is gone, because when she goes, it goes with her unless someone bothered to learn it first. Just one thing. This week, if you found something here worth keeping, subscribe so the next of these finds its way to you. Share it with a woman who would understand it in her bones, your sister, your mother, your daughter, the friend who still cooks like this and does not know how rare she has become. And in the comments, leave the one lesson your mother or your grandmother taught you that no one in your family practices anymore. Her name, where she was from, the things she knew. That is how these stories outlast the people who lived them. one name at a time, one lesson at a time, written down by someone who refused to let it disappear. These were never just lessons. They were a way of saying, you are loved, you belong. You will know how to take care of your own. That is what we are losing, and it is still, even now, what we can choose to take back.